if having done this over and over again, so if you need to design, say, the anatomy of creating an idea into a movement, right? So do you have this weird thought that could mean something, and you want to say you want to build it into a movement. I think so. What are some of the stages, and have you think it through that some of the sort of core decision points along the way that one needs to prepare for, or is there any recipe to take an idea from an idea to a moment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's really important to say we can't set out and say we want to start a movement, right? It'll never work, right? Like, I think we have to start out and saying, I believe so deeply in this idea that I really want it to succeed. And in my case, I really want it to change the way the world turns, right? Like, I want the idea to make our planet a better place. And I think if we stay focused on that, and you follow the principles that I talk about in the book, then you put your idea in a position to perhaps become a movement. But when we start off and say, hey, I want to start a movement, right? Like, already we've got the ego at play, right? And we've gotten significantly ahead of ourselves. So I think to answer this question, I want to back up and I want to tell you the story about the first project that we did at Seawall, which is the for-profit real estate company where we set out to reimagine the industry with using buildings to empower communities and unite cities. And I think this is a good example of an explanation for your idea. So we knew as a result of the work that my dad had done around education that we wanted to be in service of anybody focused on helping the next generation, anybody focused on kids. And we had heard from a group of teachers who were new to Baltimore City that they were having a hard time finding an affordable place to live, that they weren't really understanding the city when they were showing up for the first time, and that it was disorienting, and that they were then getting burnt out in the classroom, which is one of the hardest professions on the planet. And they asked us if we'd be able to build them a cool, centrally located, funky apartment building with discounted rents where they could live together, collaborate, cry, laugh, share ideas, and all of those things. And so we loved the idea for it. And we went around and we started to look for little 4-unit apartment buildings or small 5,000 square foot office space with this idea of maybe doing a little bit of both. And we kept striking out. We weren't finding the right building. And eventually a friend of ours called us and said that there was a building on the corner of Howard and 26th Street in a neighborhood called Remington, which I had been to but never really heard of by name. And that the building that he was describing was this 150-year-old abandoned warehouse building. They used to make tin cans out of it. And the way that he described it is that the building had been vacant for over 30 years, that lots of developers had tried to redevelop it. All of them had run away from the building because the neighborhood just wouldn't support any investment. And so here we come all naive, and we show up for a tour of the building with the banker and our friend who had introduced us to the building. And Vishal, it's a little hard to describe the scene that we showed up to. In front of us is this looming 5-story brick building. Every single window has been boarded up. The roof has trees growing out of it. The bricks are falling out of the facade onto the sidewalk, super dangerous. The streets that surrounded it had parked cars with smashed windows. There were vacant homes around it. It was like a dark day, right? And a dark building in that moment. And we go and we start the tour, and the banker kind of kicks open the door, and we step foot, and we got flashlights, and there's bats and pigeons flying around. 3/4 of the building you couldn't really walk on because it wasn't safe. And the banker's going off on the building. You wouldn't catch me here after dark. This place is terrible. They should just knock this eyesore down. Nothing ever good will come out of this. And the more he's talking, the more I'm aware of this narrative. I'd heard it all over the world, right? This no and can't, and it's impossible, and you're wasting your time. And the more I heard that, the more I began to fall in love with the building, right? Like if you were able to look past the negative sides of it, you would see the cool old brick, right? That could be like touched up, the massive window openings with glass in them, how cool they would be, the high ceilings, the cool old floorboards that some of them could be salvaged, right? You could see the possibility. And so the tour ends and the banker leaves and my dad and I give each other like a huge hug and we're like, yes, like this is going to be our first project. This is the one. But we knew because there was so much opposition to it, because no other developer could figure it out, because the banker who owned the building wanted nothing to do with it, that we were going to have to bring the idea to life in a completely different way. And this goes to the answer to your question. We were going to have to build it inside out. And what we mean by that is that we were going to have to make sure that the end users, the community, and the team, and I'll describe the team a little bit later, all have the same sense of pride of ownership and authorship in what was going to get created. And so we decide we're going to buy the building. We bring like our trusted advisors, our wives, our accountants down for tours of the building. And every single one of them tells us we're crazy, that you'll never get your money back on an investment there. You'll never be able to do discounted apartments for teachers. So it's more no's, right? And it's more can'ts, which further reinforced the reason that this had to happen. And also further reinforced that we were going to have to bring it to life in a really inclusive way past the ability that my dad and I had to do it on our own. So we start with the end users and we reach out to about 10 teachers that we didn't know and we invite them for a tour of the building. And keep in mind, right, we've just done 2 weeks of tours and everyone's hated the idea. And these teachers show up and my dad, we don't know any of them, but my dad gets up and he gives this amazing speech that I'll never forget. He says something along the lines of, we have listened to some of your peers and colleagues talk about how hard it is to find great, affordable, collaborative housing in the city of Baltimore. Behind me, pointing to the building, is a blank canvas that we want to help you dream up and turn into the country's first Center for Educational Excellence. We have no idea what we're doing, but we're here to listen. And he's like, so who wants to go for a tour? And it was like a coach had delivered a speech at halftime when the team was down by 20 and the teacher's like, let's go. And so we open the same door, we hand out flashlights, there's bats, there's pigeons, there's soiled mattresses and heroin needles and booze bottles throughout, all of the things we had seen with the banker. The difference on this tour is that we weren't the ones leading it, right? The teachers were effortlessly skipping through the building, pointing out the cool old windows and the places you could save floor and the neat brick and the courtyard and all of these different things. And they started to talk about we. They started to say, how cool would this be when we, how neat would this apartment be when we? And it was so inspiring to see, right? That transition of power, that inclusion of who the end users were going to be, who were able to latch on to this idea. So the tour finishes, everybody wants to participate. And those 10 teachers ended up being on our team. And they spent the next 12 months designing every square inch of their apartments, choosing their own amenities. We even let them pick their own rent, right? Based on what they could afford, based on their salaries. So all of a sudden the end users are fully bought in, right? There's nothing that's going to get in the way of this building not happening, right? They're fully committed to it. The next step is to go to the community, right? Equally as important. And we get invited to one of the neighborhood association meetings and we go in, and this is a group that has had developers come in for years and say, you are lucky that we're here. We are going to take this eyesore of a building and we are going to turn it into high-end condos or really expensive apartments or fancy shops, right? Without once asking what it is that the community wants out of the space, right? And so, again, my dad gets up and he says, look, I want to be very clear. We have come in and we intend to be neighbors and not guests. And that we have been listening to a group of teachers who's really excited about creating the country's first Center for Educational Excellence, which is discount apartments for teachers and collaborative office space for nonprofit organizations serving the public school system. And that they've looked all over town. We've looked all over town. And for some reason, we've ended up in this building, which is in the heart of your community. And this is the one that they're really passionate about, that they're really excited about. Would you like to work with these teachers and these nonprofits to help bring this dream to life? So again, it's the transfer of the ownership and authorship, right? It's not us coming in and telling the community what we're going to give them. It's asking if they want to participate in the early stages of this idea, right? This is way before it was even a movement. So now you've got your end users and your community on board. And then the second group is your team. And what I mean by team is, who are your guardian angels? Who are those people who have been there and done that, who have failed more times than you'll ever succeed, right? That have been through the trenches, that have seen great success, that have seen great failure. And how do you bring them on and have them participate in the growth of the idea? So with the teachers and the community on board, we had designed the building, we had gotten the construction priced. It was a $20 million project, which was $19 million more than we thought our first project was going to cost. And the scariest part was that there was a $14 million gap in the financial stack. So because our rents were so low for our teachers and the building was so expensive, we could only borrow $6 million from the bank. So we had $14 million that we had no idea how we were going to fill that gap. And we invited some friends who had done similar type of neighborhood development work. And we told them about the ideas that the teachers in the community had, and that explained to them how we were stuck. It was amazing. And they started telling us about these different tax credit financing programs that could leverage in some free sources of capital and equity and historic tax credits and new market tax credits and all these amazing things. We had no idea. And before we knew it, by the end of that first week after that meeting, the phone was ringing off the hook of banks and investors that wanted to participate, but not participate so they could make a bunch of money, participate because they believe so deeply in the importance of creating a building in a city that was going to roll out the red carpet for the people doing the most important work in our cities. Anybody focused on kids and education. And before you knew it, Vishal, we closed financing miraculously. 9 months before we finished construction, we had leased 100% of the building. By the time we finished, there was a waiting list of over 300 teachers waiting to get in. And we had never spent $1 on marketing or advertising, right? What had happened was that from the very beginning, we had been intentional about inclusively growing the idea and making sure that the end users, the community, and the team were the ones driving this forward the same way that we were. My guess is that those teachers left the meetings and were like, "You're never going to believe this crazy developer, let us choose our own rents and design our own apartments, and they're never going to pull it off. But if they do, you got to get in." And the word went viral, right? Because so many people believed in it. So again, you can't set out to create a movement. And to be clear, we finished the one, we got invited to do another one just down the road, and then we got invited to do them all over the country, right? Create more of these centers for educational excellence. And so to get back to your original question, you can't start off by saying, "I want to build a movement." You have to bring an idea to life, understand that it's not your own, that you should be feel blessed and honored to work on it. And that the more people who believe that the idea, that really feel it in their heart, that the idea is also theirs, the more opportunity you give that idea to maybe one day grow into a powerful and impactful movement.